Welcome, everybody, to this special edition of the First Friday Call, our fourth Friday call. We weren't sure whether we'd have 100 or 3, so we do have something in between there. And Vanessa said she's very happy to do it whenever somebody wants to hear it. The purpose of our call is to let the local communities know about the experts, the education, and the economic resources available to help their communities and the businesses they love. We have today, as always, the call is being recorded and will be out on our link. I'll put that in the chat in a moment, but I'm going to preface for you at the end of the call. There will be a very brief 3-question quiz that helps us evaluate the call, and I'll give the answers to Vanessa as well at the end to give her input. So I'm going to tell you what the questions are going to be. Did you learn something today that you can use immediately? How many people will you forward this information to? And what did you learn today that was most helpful to you? And I will give you that quiz at the end, but just very quickly. So our speaker today is Vanessa Lamoreaux, the Senior Director of KDOT. And if you watched her video before, it will sound very similar, but hopefully you may, like Gary, maybe you've thought of some questions since the last call, and we'll have time for that at the end. So Vanessa, thank you for joining us, and take it away.
All right, so good morning, everybody. As Nancy mentioned, my name is Vanessa. The last name is Lamoreaux. Don't worry about spelling it. There will not be a quiz on that later on. It has all the vowels except an I, and it includes a random X. So there you go. I am a senior director at the Kansas Department of Transportation, and that means I get to wear a lot of hats. I do everything from public involvement and government relations to coordinating the infrastructure hub for the state of Kansas. And that is what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. And I'm really excited that you are here to take part in this important conversation, to work and understand the opportunities associated with the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, as we call it in Kansas, and what that means for your community, your area, and our whole state. And kind of the theme of all of this is that we're stronger when we work together. And let's see, oh, there it goes, in advance. There we go. So you might be wondering why I'm showing you this picture. And it's a really important picture because this is really what's happening as we're all navigating and learning about the opportunities and the challenges associated with the bipartisan infrastructure law. If you look, we've got somebody who's hopefully flying that airplane. We've got somebody that's driving a car, and they appear to be doing repairs on the airplane while it's flying. And this is kind of the state of play for the bipartisan infrastructure law for all of us. Bill is new, so there's no playbook that we can go to and say this is what we should do because this was not successful before. We're literally building the plane in the air and reading on the how to fly it manual all at the same time, and we're all on the same plane. So what this means is that we're learning as we go. We're trying new things. And that means we're going to have some early wins and also some early losses. But the important thing to remember is that each time that we try and succeed or try and fail, we've learned something because we are stronger when we work together. So as I always tell people, Bill is a team sport. Welcome to the team. So let's start out with who is Bill. So Bill is shorthand for the bipartisan infrastructure law, but it also has another name that you may have heard, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. Just for clarification, IIJA was the original package that was presented to Congress. And when it passed out of Congress and went to the president's desk for signature in November of 21, that's when it became bill. What this means is that IIJA and bill are the exact same thing. We've elected to call it bill for our purposes because it's easier for people to remember. So bill provides investment opportunities through 2 main funding streams, formula and discretionary, across 5 years. The total investment for the United States is $1.2 trillion. And you'll see I have this highlighted on the slide as well. This includes nearly 400 programs across 12 federal agencies. Now, that's a lot to keep track of. I always tell people, close your eyes, imagine there's a column of water in front of you. Now try and hug that water. That's what it's like to try and wrap your mind around bill. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces. So don't worry if it's confusing to everybody, okay? So bill includes about 60% of the total bill funds are distributed through formula funding, and then 40% are distributed through grant or discretionary programs. So let's take a minute and just talk about the difference between formula versus discretionary. So there are rules, no matter the funding stream, for how, when, et cetera, dollars are spent. And those rules are determined by legislation and or the funding agency. And they're different for every program. And remember, there's 400 of those. So formula funds are in essence guaranteed dollars. These funds are distributed through federal agencies to usually corresponding state agencies through existing and some new programs. Many existing programs are also receiving additional dollars. So it's not all new money, it's base money plus additional funding. So formula funds does not mean that the feds send the dollars to the state and then the states send the dollars to the locals. Now that might be true in some programs, but that is not true of all programs in bill. Remember, there's no one size fits all answer. In formula funds, as a quick demonstration, let's just pretend that it was a $50 million program. And the formula distribution math says that every state gets an equal distribution. So in our $50 million program example, each state gets $1 million. Pretty easy. Now, grant funds or discretionary programs, which includes both new and existing programs, these are earned and competitive dollars. These are distributed through, again, new and existing programs, and there are guidelines that are associated with each grant, and each of those guidelines are determined by the federal agency. So these are merit-based, meaning that every application is graded and awards are made based on the projects that are determined to have the highest merit among all the applications. So in this example, again, let's just say we have $50 million to distribute through a discretionary program, and they received 10 applications. Only 3 of them get awarded. $5 million to Waterville, Kansas, $10 million to Lincoln, Nebraska, and then the remaining $35 million to Boulder, Colorado. That means 3 people got awards, 7 did not. The other thing to know is that if you don't write for any discretionary programs, you're not going to get any discretionary dollars. So in case you're wondering how you can start to figure out what the universe looks like, here are some resources that I'd like to put out there for you. First is the guidebook. I call it my Bill Bible. Oh, sorry, this is mine. And as you can see, it's a pretty thick document and it's tabbed out to keep track of all the different programs that I'm keeping track of. That's all of it. If you are in a rural community and you just want to understand what the opportunities are connected to rural, go to the rural playbook. If you are supporting tribes or helping tribes go after dollars and programs, you want to go to the tribal playbook because it takes that whole universe and narrows it down. And then there's also the technical assistance guidebook, which explains the different opportunities available from federal agencies to obtain technical assistance related to the various programs. Where can you find all this stuff? Good question. You can find it on kshub.org. And just so you know, the original source for these documents is bill.gov. So what is bill for? Bills for all different types of infrastructure sectors. You've got transportation, road, bridges, airports, rail, transit, bike, ped, you name it, it's in there. Climate, energy, and environment. It's also for broadband, and it includes resilience, which is spread really across all of them, but cybersecurity really shows up on the resilience side. And most importantly, bill opens up the door for all types of recipients. So for the first time in a long time, cities, counties, MPOs, tribes, states, and the list is pretty long, universities, private organizations, they now have the ability to write directly for these programs. So for some of you, you're probably saying, fabulous, my community has a project. Now I want to know what I can match it to. Other people are saying, my community's got this idea. What do I do with it? And then somebody else might be saying, well, I see there's a grant for this. Is this an opportunity for my community? Where do I start? Here's the thing. You don't have to decide which came first, the chicken or the egg. You can start in any one of these places and utilize resources and connect them to bill opportunities to help advance your community. So what I always tell people as they're considering this is the first thing that you need to do is you need to prioritize. What are your projects that you want to move forward? What are your ideas that you want to investigate and learn more about? Or you can say, what's my highest order of need in terms of my infrastructure sectors, right? I want to invest in water. We as a community want to use this to advance our water goals because that's our biggest need. It doesn't matter how you choose to prioritize, but do engage in that discussion because it's really going to help you decide where to put your chickens or your eggs and in what basket. The goal here is to recognize that you're not going to be perfect at it. So don't panic. This is not a generate a list today and use it for the next 5 years. I guarantee you it's going to change over time and it's going to change based on the opportunities that are available. But once you have a generalized priority list or a very specific priority list, that's when you can go and take the step to identify bill programs and then sign up for the webinars, go to the federal agency website, learn all you can about it so you can get connected to those timelines and begin to plan for the future. And that is what's super important. Every time I'm interested in a bill program, I go to the authorizing agency, whether it's USDOT, Bureau of Reclamation, EPA, and I sign up for every single thing that I can so I can stay on top of what's going on with that opportunity. The other thing that you need to do is you need to understand very quickly if the entity you're assisting has a grants.gov account. Many of the opportunities that you're going to be working on associated with bill require submission through grants.gov. And it is not like flipping on a light switch. It can take weeks or even months to go through the process of establishing a grants.gov account. If you don't know, what I found is that usually the best place to start asking that question, hey, Vanessa City, do you have a grants.gov account, is to get in touch with the finance people. They are the ones that at the end of the day seem to be the keepers of the account for the entity that you might be working with. Again, just remember, it takes time. So if the grant application is due on Friday and it's Monday of that week, probably not going to happen. The other thing to keep in mind is that as you're looking at different bill opportunities, understand that there is usually a required local match. It can be as little as 0. It can be as much as 75%. I would say average is 20%, okay? Also recognize that under the caution tape on that slide, it requires some technical and grant expertise in order to put these applications together. I'm not saying it's impossible for anybody to do it because it's not. Have success stories to share, but it does require some pretty significant effort. The other thing to note is that this is not like going after state funding. Federal programs have a lot of different reporting requirements that could represent administrative burden. So just make sure that you read all the fine print and understand what you're signing up for. So if you are curious to learn more about what is the universe, and instead of looking through a book of 600 pages, here are some other resources that you can go to find out, because there is no set schedule of when grants release. So it is really important that you stay on top of what the opportunities are as you're going through this exploration. And you can find all this stuff at kshub.org/grants. Here are the resources. The National Governors Association has a great resource, and you can type in what you're interested in and it'll pop information up. If you are just interested in what is available to counties, the National Association of Counties has a great resource. So again, they've taken the universe and they've shrunk it down to just those things that counties are eligible for. And then there's the Local Infrastructure Hub, which is another good resource and really focuses on local municipalities and their eligibility. So in terms of those funds, $1.2 trillion investment nationwide, what's Kansas's benefit here? So remember, formula funds are those guaranteed dollars, and 60% of that 1.2 trillion is being distributed through formula funds. Kansas is scheduled to receive $3.8 billion. Over the life of bill, so through fiscal year 2027. How does that shake out? Well, you can see that information in the blue box on hopefully the right-hand side of your screen. On the competitive side, look at this, TBD. Why? Because there is no limit, there's no minimum or maximum that Kansans and Kansas can receive. So it's up to all of us to take advantage of those opportunities. But here's the thing about opportunity. A lot of people miss it because it's dressed in overalls and it looks an awful lot like work. And there's truth in that statement, but there's also truth in the fact that there is work to do in Kansas, and we shouldn't make any mistake about that. So here is our infrastructure grade for the state of Kansas. And on average, our overall GPA in 2018, which was the most recent data set available, was a C. Now, we all know how averages work. That means there's a few A's in there, also means there's a few F's in there. And so what does that look like? Because a C doesn't sound that bad, but here's what it looks like in news headlines. None of those are good news headlines. Not a single one. So there's work to do, and there's opportunity in front of us to do that work. So the Kansas Infrastructure Hub was really developed to help Kansas find the sweet spot. We're assessing what Kansas needs are. We're looking at our state programs and resources and also those federal programs. And the hub exists right there in the center of that Venn diagram, where we're able to say, hey, there's this great opportunity, but here are the challenges. So how can we help? And that's why the Infrastructure Hub was formed. It is encompassed with what we call our subcabinet. And our subcabinet is made up of those agencies that represent the different sectors and are also the main recipients of those formula dollars. So KDOT, the Kansas Department of Transportation, was designated as the lead agency for the Infrastructure Hub. And I'm guessing based on our name, you understand the space that we play in terms of the infrastructure sectors. Kansas Department of Commerce, why are they at the table? Broadband. The Office of Broadband lives in Commerce, and so that's why they're at the table. Department of Health and Environment, they obviously have a role to play on the water side, but also on some of our environmental issues that can be addressed through bill. Department of Agriculture, interesting choice. Well, water, dams, floodplains, a lot of that stuff goes there. Department of Administration, cybersecurity. That's where our cybersecurity dollars flow in Kansas. So that's why they're at the table. Now, Kansas Corporation Commission and the Kansas Water Office are not cabinet level agencies in Kansas, but they are our counterparts to the Energy Department. So the Kansas Corporation Commission, and then the Kansas Water Office is the third part of the entities that have a role to play in water issues in Kansas. The hub, broadly speaking, also includes an advisory group, which is composed of public and private organization leaders, people that are just plain old good at getting some conversation starters going. So they're good at collaboration and also big thinkers. And what we're doing is we are an information exchange and resource center. We've designed things to help connect people to opportunities. Most importantly, we are all voluntary and we are all collaborative. We are all doing this as part of our other duties as assigned. And in case you've been wondering what we have been doing, we had an infrastructure summit in last summer. We were going to try and do one in 2023, but due to some delays with legislation and other things, we decided that we might hold off and do it early in 23. So it kind of be a combo year. We've got that website. We're constantly looking at what the barriers are and how we can help. We're working to build partnerships with organizations and entities across the state. And we're doing a lot of community engagement as well as that key part, which is grant and resource matchmaking. So even with so much opportunity that's out there, here are the problems that we face or the challenges that we face as Kansas. We don't want to get lost in a crowded field. This is a national opportunity. So that means for every grant that's available, Kansas is not just competing Topeka against Wichita, Great Bend against Liberal. Kansas competing is Great Bend, Kansas competing against Houston, Texas, competing against Tampa, Florida, plus Waterville, Kansas, plus Anchorage, Alaska. So we have to figure out how to not get lost in a crowded field. That means we have to pace ourselves, not only as a state, but I would also encourage you as you're working with your entities, pace yourself. Go back to that prioritization. What is it that you want to put at the forefront so you can go after those opportunities? As you're exploring opportunities, also recognize that we have to respond to new national themes like safety, equity, resilience, and climate change. Those are not things that we have traditionally talked about in context of some of these things like roads, bridges, cybersecurity, et cetera. So just recognize that those things are out there. We also know that there are some pretty challenging issues related to resources, primary one being local match. We know that there are a lot of entities that just plain old can't generate that 20% on average local match for these opportunities and to bring them to the table. We also know that we have grant and technical expertise issues that we need to address, as well as workforce issues. We've just kind of emerged from a supply chain situation in the United States. So we need to be sensitive to the fact that that could raise its ugly head again and might impact us. We also need to make sure that what we're talking about advancing is ready to be advanced. The closer your project is to being shovel ready, the more likely it is to be successful. So how are you going to be successful? Think big, collaborate. Don't let city boundaries, county boundaries be the barrier to going after an opportunity. It is critical that we think big. The feds are not going to want to fund 2 water treatment applications in Waterville, Kansas and Blue Rapids, Kansas, towns that are, 5 miles apart. They would probably like to fund one big water grant that might bring 2 water treatment facilities, but it's one grant application. Think big. We're Americans. We want it all, and we want it all right now. The reality is that's not going to happen. So make sure that you stick to your prioritization and revisit that list frequently. Make sure that you're looking for opportunities to leverage dollars, partnerships, et cetera. And I'm going to talk more about dollar opportunities. Make sure that you're engaged in the process. We don't know how to help if we don't understand what the problems are. And because we did the work to be engaged, and you all did the work to be engaged with us, here's what I am delighted to be able to share with you today. We recently launched the Build Kansas initiative, and it is designed to specifically address those critical local needs and help maximize Kansas's opportunity in relationship to the bipartisan infrastructure law. What is it? Thanks to bipartisan legislative action and governor support, the Build Kansas legislation was passed. It is a one-time investment of $215 million from the state general fund that covers the life of the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, so through fiscal year 2027. Build Kansas legislation includes $5 million annually to provide capacity extension for hub activities, which includes staffing and consultant support to facilitate the vital task of technical assistance to local communities that are interested in pursuing bill opportunities, and then helping them deliver when an opportunity is secured. Here's the big one. The bulk of the funding, $200 million, is for providing match leverage for eligible entities to secure federal funding opportunities through bill. We know that match and technical expertise on the front end, so that capacity extension, are the 2 biggest challenges Kansas communities face. It is a 2-pronged approach. So in prong 1, for that $5 million annually, the capacity extension team is here to help people engage in that important task of prioritizing, identifying what the needs are, helping understand what the projects are, and then matching those to funding programs and grants that are associated with the bipartisan infrastructure law. It also includes some grant writing assistance. We don't have the dollars or the capacity to be able to write everybody's grant, but what we can do is offer some no-cost technical assistance on the front end, 1 hour for free for everybody, as many times as you need it on one opportunity at a time, hey, I don't understand what a benefit cost analysis is. Help me understand what this is and how to do it. I don't even know how to assess whether or not this project adequately meets this merit criteria associated with this opportunity. Help me draft that paragraph. That's what it's there for. And then once an opportunity is secured or awarded from the federal government, that means that you get 5 hours of assistance to administer those federal dollars, understand reporting requirements, help submitting those documents, etc. That's all free, no cost. The most exciting part, though, is probably prong number 2. That's what people call me about the most. How do I get access to that $200 million? So the goal with the Build Kansas initiative is to leverage state funds, that $215 million, to capture more federal dollars for Kansas communities. If the average local match requirements for most bill programs is 20%, which is what it averages out to be, that $200 million investment in the Build Kansas fund specifically that help the local generate match, that could turn into as much as $800 million that comes to Kansas for infrastructure projects. And that's just the hard dollars. That doesn't include the long-term economic benefits, the long-term quality of life benefits, new job creation, long-term job creation. There's a lot to be gained from this opportunity. So here's some important notes, though, about the Build Kansas initiative. The hub, the infrastructure hub, has nothing to do with project selection. Remember, the Build Kansas initiative is designed specifically to address opportunities associated with the bipartisan infrastructure law. Bipartisan infrastructure law opportunities are awarded and graded by the feds, by each federal agency that is providing that opportunity. We don't have anything to do with it. So that means if you went after Build Kansas funds and you were successful, and you were also successful at the federal level, then you would receive the Build Kansas fund dollars. You only get them if you're awarded the federal dollars. This is an additive thing only. Communities can go forward without asking for dollars from the Build Kansas fund and without seeking assistance from the capacity extension team. As we were building out this opportunity, there are some things that we wanted to make sure that we kept in mind. We wanted to make sure that the Build Kansas Fund was easy to understand, not only the requirements, but easy to apply for and easy to access the funding. So in other words, we wanted to keep it simple, silly, right? We also wanted to make sure that the Build Kansas funds were available to all eligible entities, especially those without the ability to pursue programs that require a match on their own. So we wanted to make sure that it was available. We also wanted to make sure it was flexible to ensure that the distributions of funds process is able to flex back and forth through each type of federal program without that being burdensome to you all on the back end. We also wanted to make sure that we're utilizing grant required federal reports and other tools to support accountability and transparency. So what I want to do now is kind of walk you through, because this is all great in theory, but let's get down to the brass tacks, Vanessa. What does this look like, and what do I need to know today in order to make this work for me? So what you see here on the slide is actually an explanation and an overview of how the process works, and I want to walk through that. So the first thing you need to do is you need to take your prioritized list and your community needs to identify what they want to do and what grant program they want to go after. So once you've identified your bill program and you think it's an appropriate match, and you've confirmed that A, there is a match requirement, and B, how much of it there is, and C, how much you need from the Build Kansas Fund, you want to start your application process at the federal program level, so your federal bill program application. You also at the same time want to be doing your Build Kansas Fund process, okay? After you've started writing, also do this part, right? Where you're working on your federal application and you're also working on your Build Kansas Fund application. You want to send your Build Kansas Fund application in as soon as you have enough details to do so. Things that they're going to ask you that we ask for are like, what's the opportunity? When is it due? What's your project? How much match do you need? How much money are you applying for? How much other type of money are you bringing to the table, whether it's local tax dollars or private donations, whatever the situation is. And you send it to us. You're still working on your federal application at this time. You're not going to be done. The reason that you want to send in your Build Kansas Fund application at that point is because you will need to have your approval for the Build Kansas funds and the letter of confirmation from the infrastructure hub in order to be able to put that in your federal application that says, yes, it's $1 million program. We have to generate $200,000 for our local match. We have $100,000 and the Build Kansas Fund is supplying the other $100,000. You have to have that letter to be able to include it in your bill application. okay? Then you'll notice there's this big kind of red or pink line or orange, depending on what color you think it is. What does that mean? Well, this is what I like to call the patience practice period. Because once you submit your application, it can take as long as 6 months, and I'm not even kidding, for you to know whether or not you receive that federal award. It can also happen as soon as 30 days. It's a practice patience. That's your patience practice period, okay? And it is sometimes 4 quarters long. So just pace yourself. So while we're all practicing patience, eventually that game does end, and you get notice that you received your federal award. Then you break out the champagne and the party hats. At that same time, as soon as you receive your federal program award notification, you want to share that notice with the infrastructure hub, because that becomes our cue to work in partnership with you to develop access to that funding. Okay. Now, what's the application success rate? Well, great question. So far, it's 100% on the Build Kansas funds because we haven't received a complete application yet. We know that applications are in progress, but we haven't received one. Our goal is to help as many as possible, as quickly as possible. So don't delay, send it in as soon as you know, and have the information available to complete it. So that way we have plenty of time to get it back to you. What happens if you don't get the federal notice? Well, those dollars, remember $100,000 was the Build Kansas fund in my earlier example. It goes back into the fund so that other people can access those dollars. Okay. So you're not getting a check from the state of Kansas for $100,000 when you receive notification that you do have the Build Kansas Fund access. Instead, what we're doing is, think about it as pre-obligating. We're setting it aside and saying that $100,000 is spoken for. If you get the federal notification, we start working with you so that way you can start accessing those dollars. If you don't get it, it just goes back to the fund. Does that make sense to everybody? I want to make sure I'm really clear here. Okay. So what's next? Well, we have launched the Build Kansas Fund application. You can find it at kshub.org. We actually were able to already transition from email submissions to using a submittable online platform. This process is like flipping a switch. You can sign up. If you don't have a submittable login credential, you can sign up and get a submittable online credential in as little as 20 minutes. Okay, so that is live, and all applications are online, and that is how they're reviewed. The great thing about Submittable and this online platform is that it also enables you as a submitter to understand where your application is in the process. We have already established communication channels with partners, organizations like Nancy's, where we're doing this outreach and we're engaging in this conversation. And we also have the opportunity to use our capacity extension team. And then just know that we are going to be learning and refining this process as we go through it. We tried to stand this up very quickly. It means that, just like with Bill, remember that airplane in the car situation? We're doing the same thing here, but we feel like we have a really good foundation to build from that enables Kansans to be successful. So the last thing that I want to share with you, as soon as I get it over here on my screen, is I just want to show you where you can find some pretty critical information on our website. So this one's pretty easy. If you have questions about the Build Kansas Fund, all you do is go to the kshub.org website, click on the Build Kansas Fund thing at the top, title on the top, and it's going to pull this page up. There is a webinar that's been pre-recorded, and it walks you through the application process. By the way, it's me on the webinar, so grab your popcorn and settle in. And we walk through every single question. We talk about what it means, and there's the webinar right there. You can also access online documentation through the FAQs. You can use this page to go right to where all the open grant opportunities are associated with Bill. So wealth of information available right at your fingertips, which is one of the reasons that we love the web. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the technical assistance tab is also super helpful because it walks through what types of technical assistance is available to you and how to access it. So right there, get technical assistance, you can click that button and it launches it. If you know where or which area or regional council your entity that you're working with falls in, you can email folks from here and ask them to come and help you engage in those prioritization conversations. You can ask them to help you match programs to opportunities that you've identified. And then finally, I just want to also say that if all else fails, you can reach out to me. So Kansas has established a one-stop shop email address, and that's bill@ks.gov. That email goes to me. If I don't know the answer, chances are I know who does. And so I forward that email onto them, and then they get back with you to help you continue down your journey of exploration and hopefully success in pursuing bipartisan infrastructure law or bill opportunities. So that wraps it up for me. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever questions you have.
So Vanessa, we did have a question, and Deb is no longer on the call because she had another call. But if we are looking to repurpose an empty commercial building into a multi-room childcare, do you know of any bill funds that would be appropriate for that?
So what I'm going to say here is that no. I mean, directly, the answer is no. There are no special designated funds that address this particular issue. However, remember when I said to think big? There might be opportunity to leverage other bill opportunities, like the RAISE grant as a for example, if part of repurposing a commercial building can be things like improving bike ped routes, or introducing EV charging, or bringing better broadband into the community. So again, what I would say flat out is no, but that it's not a hard no, right? It's a think creatively, and be sure to utilize your capacity, the technical assistance offered through the Hub Capacity Extension Team to explore how you might be able to connect the dots and make something like that happen.
Right. And Bailey says that they're looking for something similar, but they have a building that was named a condemned building that the mechanics work out of. Do you have a question about that, Bailey? Did Vanessa's question answer help you? And of course, there's always, other sites. Vanessa, are you able to easily bring up the sites that you referenced, like the NACO and some of those sites, and put them into the chat?
Yes, I'm actually doing that right now.
Okay, very good.
And I'll drop those in.
Vanessa's a good multitasker. I think some of you got in because Vanessa saw you even before I did. So thank you, Vanessa.
Okay.
Okay, and I think Gary's question is similar. Repeat the steps we should go through to access information on what programs may fit, for example, a road or water project. So maybe it's different, maybe it's the same, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so Gary, while I'm doing some of this multitasking, I'll answer your question. Okay, so here's the one that this is the National Association of Counties one. And here's the reason that I'm bringing this up, Gary, in relationship to your question, is that there are a ton. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. There is no shortage of places that you can go to learn about bill opportunities, what's open, what's available, what's coming open, all of that jazz. What I will say is that your definitive source should be, oh, I can't type and talk at the same time apparently now. Sorry, my multitasking skills just died. Here we go. So this will be all of those. And the last one I just dropped in was the National Governors Association. Grants.gov is your definitive source. The National Governors Association, the local infrastructure organization, the National Association of Counties, they are all scraping that information off of grants.gov. So I'm not saying they're not accurate, because that's not true. They are accurate. However, remember, they are scraping the information and re-showing it on their website. Grants.gov is where every single thing is listed. It can be a little challenging on grants.gov. And by the way, to do the searching part on grants.gov, you don't have to have an account. You only need to have an account if you are trying to submit and input application information. So you can search on grants.gov for whatever you want for free without an account. Grants.gov can be a little overwhelming because it is the entirety of the grants universe for all programs, all agencies, etc. So if you just typed in water on grants.gov, your return list could be 1,000 deep. And that's a lot of figuring it out, right? So I usually suggest that people go to the National Association of Counties, the National Association of Governors, or the Bloomberg Local Infrastructure Organization to kind of narrow the search just to those things that are bill related, right? And then after you find it, that's when you'd want to go, because then you know the name of it. They usually have a link to the grants.gov page where the application and the NOFO lives, notice of funding opportunity. So that way you can see all of that stuff together. But certainly you can do it directly on grants.gov. In terms of all three of those, grants.gov doesn't have a great search engine. It's not as refined as the National Association of Counties, the Local Infrastructure Hub, or the National Governors Association. So those three websites have a little more refined search engine where you can type in things like, oh, well, here, I'll just pull it up. Oh, good Lord. I don't know why I didn't think about that. I'll just show it on the screen. How about that? So this one that I've gone to, this is the National Governors Association version. And that's the link that I provided. You're like, where is the information? Well, just keep scrolling, just like Dory, just keep swimming. We're just going to keep scrolling down to the bottom of the page. And this is where you would type in railroad. You have a railroad project that you want to do. Okay. So now what it's returned to me is all of the projects specific to railroad, or all of the opportunities specific to railroad. And you can see right now that the RIF, the Railroad Rehab and Improvement Financing Loan application is open. So if I were to click on it, what it's going to do is it's going to take me to the federal agency website. So that way I can learn more about it, because this one is a financing related issue. That's why it goes that way. If I were to do a different one, so see how this one says applications are closed for fiscal year 2022 NOFO. That doesn't mean that you can't click on it and learn more about it. And it's actually a good thing to do, because that way you can be planning ahead. Oh, let's do a different one. What do I know that's open right now? Okay, so this one tells me right now that the Reconnecting Communities pilot program, which is an actual transportation program, it's an active NOFO, but it closes on the 28th. So if I click on this, there it goes. It took me directly to the grants.gov website, where now I can take a quick read through. I can learn more about the grants here. You can get connected to the website, and then you can also go through the process of seeing the actual NOFOs. Okay. Does that help, Gary? Does that answer your question adequately? I'm trying here without trying to overwhelm at the same time.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions that folks have?
Yeah, I don't see any others that are already there. I did notice, back to matching Kansas build funds, in the example that you gave, you said my community will contribute 100,000, and the Build Kansas Fund has committed 100,000. If my community said to the Build Kansas Fund, I just want 200,000, do we have the opportunity If you say, nope, we don't have it, do we have the opportunity to say, well, do you have 100,000?
Yeah, there's no minimum or maximum that's associated
Okay.
with the Build Kansas Fund application process. So if a community, Vanessaville, Kansas, had zero ability to generate match and needed that $200,000, then they could ask for the whole 200,000 through the Build Kansas Fund process.
Very good.
Other questions? No, Gary, a community does not need to necessarily contribute from their own resources to enhance their odds of getting approved through the Build Kansas Fund. Absolutely, however, at the federal level, if the community does not have that matching dollar amount from somewhere, whether it's the Build Kansas Fund or somewhere else, it's a non-starter at a federal application level. But for Build Kansas Fund, the answer is no.
Right, good question. So while you're thinking, I will put this out, and I don't see any other extension agents on here, but I'll be your intermediary. Some of you know that I teach a grant writing basics class, and some of our local extension agents and districts are starting to gather their municipalities together to work together. And so we are going to, for example, in Osage County, they're going to host an in-person workshop where all 5 municipalities and anybody else that wants to come can be part of that. The value, though, is that there's time to work together, and we will be bringing people with expertise to those discussions. So people who have written these federal grants will be in the room to talk to you. Another occurrence is happening. I don't know where all of you are. The ones I recognize are not probably in this region, but on January 31st, there are 5 counties in Kansas, Southwest Kansas, Scott, Finney, Stevens, Seward, and Haskell. And of course, they'll open it up to anybody that's willing to drive to Garden City, Kansas on January 31st. And we'll host a similar thing with people in the room. And that one for sure, we will have community development block grants, people from Commerce there as well. So as you transition to the next grant season, you'll be in the room with people who have that expertise. If you're in a region and you'd love to emulate that, either reach out to me and I'll reach out to your extension districts or agents, or you can start from the bottom and work up either direction. Go to your extension agent and see if they're willing to host such a thing. What other, have any of you thought of some other questions you'd like to ask or offer? Wouldn't it be awesome if we got like 20% all the funds that were available for discretionary funds?
I would love it. I would love to have that problem. And one thing, because that would be a problem, right? Then we'd have to ask for more money, right? That would be a great problem to have. Plus, it also means that we're bringing so many federal dollars to do so many infrastructure projects to our state. And that's a win for every Kansan, no matter where you are. So I would love to have that problem. One thing I did just want to mention is that several people have asked in other sessions or presentations that I've done, can you access the Build Kansas Fund for anything besides bipartisan infrastructure law? The answer is no. It is designed specifically to address bipartisan infrastructure law or bill opportunities. There is the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, and a lot of people have asked if that could be cadged on. The answer is anything is possible, but right now it is only specific to bipartisan infrastructure law. Same way with the technical support. We do know there's a lot of interest around including Inflation Reduction Act, as well as maybe CHIPS and some other federal programs with this opportunity. And so we're certainly open to that conversation. But right now the answer is just bill.
Perfect. And it reminds me of an example that I'll give to all of you. I mean, the reason Build even exists is because at the July 22 Kansas Infrastructure Hub meeting, local communities like yours says, so what? We don't have the matching funds anyway. Well, they went to the legislature and asked for them. So Vanessa's right. You know, you're creating the need, you're telling the legislature where the need is, where the desire and where the willingness is to meet that need. In my history with early childhood initiatives, we wrote for an early Head Start grant for Topeka, and we were not successful. In the following year, the legislature created a pool of funds for early Head Starts in Kansas, and only those federal applications that were refused were part of the pool. And so that possibility exists. So sometimes we are successful and sometimes we will learn and new opportunities will open up for us. With that, I am going to, let's see.
So Gary, your question about formula dollars or just discretionary. So the way that it is currently worded in the legislation is that it is bill opportunities. Primarily the intent there was for the discretionary programs, and there may be a mention of discretionary programs in the legislation, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But that is the intent, that it's the discretionary dollars or the discretionary programs.
So other questions? While you're thinking, on October 6th is a regular First Friday call, and the subject of the call is, Vanessa has mentioned trails more than once. So on October 6th, we're going to have how can business owners help create trail towns. Jeff Carroll is going to bring friends from Ottawa to tell us how businesses help to create trail towns. And then starting on October 10th, the Kansas Trails Council and Sunflower Foundation and Extension are going to do a series of 6 webinars, one a month, on, we're calling it Trail Talk Tuesdays, that will help you to know if I want to do a public trail, enhance a public trail, start a public trail, what are the resources and who knows about this. I think that part of the value of these calls is seeing Vanessa's face, hearing her friendly voice, and knowing this is not scary. I know somebody. I'm on the inside. I know these people. And so that's what we're trying to create with these Zoom calls on trails, is to take away the fear and give you the opportunity to do great things. And as Vanessa has said, trails open up KDOT funds and transportation funds and thinking bigger. So that's really good to hear too. So if there are no other questions, I always leave with a thought for the day. And this one is from big thinker Theodore Roosevelt. And he says, it's hard to fail, but it is worse to have never tried to succeed. So thank you all for joining us. And because you are registered, you will now get this a link to the call. But you can count on the fact that by Monday, the link will be in the site that I told you about on the K-State Research and Extension archive. Thanks, everybody, and create a great Kansas day.
Bye, guys.